Sometimes the people we trust to protect us are just as powerless against the darkness as we are. Even with training and authority, some mysteries leave officers staring into the void, helpless. Tonight, we dive into true stories where the thin blue line was stretched to its breaking point. These cases remind us that sometimes the system can only document tragedy, not prevent it. So, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself for a terrifying encounter with your scariest thoughts. Moments that will make you want to click on a different video, but out of curiosity in the second story, you won't be able to stop watching and listening. I'm not here to scare you, but to make you aware of the mysteries of the unknown, a time others were not as fortunate as you. If you enjoy the strange, dark, and mysterious, please consider liking this video and subscribing. Now let's begin. The town of Pine Hollow was a picturesque, sleepy community nestled in a valley surrounded by dense forests. Life was predictable and safe. Kids played in the streets, and the biggest news was a bear tipping over garbage cans. But when Clara Mayhew disappeared, it felt like a tear in reality. Clara was the town's sweetheart, working at the library and volunteering at the animal shelter. She had a smile that could light up a room. On October 14th, she had dinner with her parents. It was a perfectly normal evening. Clara hugged her parents goodbye around 8:30 p.m. She drove off into the cool autumn night. The drive was short, less than 10 minutes. Her mother saw Clara's taillights disappear around the corner. Everything seemed in order. But something went terribly wrong. Clara's familiar journey became a mystery. She never made it home. She vanished. The silence she left behind was deafening. The next morning, when Clara didn't show up for her shift at the library, her boss, a kind older woman named Mrs. Gable, wasn't immediately concerned. Clara was impeccably reliable, but maybe she had a flat tire or had overslept. Mrs. Gable tried calling her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She left a message, then another an hour later. By noon, a small knot of worry had begun to form in her stomach. She decided to call Clara's parents just to check. The moment Mrs. Mayhew answered the phone, she knew. A mother's intuition is a powerful thing, and hers was screaming that something was dreadfully wrong. Clara's parents immediately drove to her apartment. They found her blue sedan parked in its usual spot behind the bakery, looking completely ordinary. But when they used their spare key to get inside her apartment, an icy chill went down their spines. The place was pristine, untouched. The bed was neatly made, there were no dishes in the sink, and her purse and keys were missing. It was clear she had never made it back the night before. Panic set in, sharp and suffocating. They called the Pine Hollow Police Department, their voices trembling as they explained that their daughter was gone. The police, led by Chief Brody, a man who had known Clara since she was a little girl, responded quickly. But in a town like Pine Hollow, a missing person case was uncharted territory. They were used to dealing with traffic violations and the occasional dispute between neighbors, not a potential abduction. Chief Brody assured the Mayhews they would do everything they could, but even in those early hours, a sense of unease settled over the small police station. They started with the basics, checking local hospitals, questioning friends, and trying to ping Clara's phone, which was either turned off or out of battery. Every lead they pursued was a dead end. No one had seen or heard from Clara after she left her parents' house. Her bank accounts were untouched, and her social media was silent. It was as if she had driven around that corner and simply ceased to exist. The first 48 hours, the most critical window in any missing person investigation, ticked by with agonizing slowness. The police were doing their job, following procedure, but they were running into a solid brick wall. The initial flicker of professional concern was slowly morphing into a dawning sense of helplessness. As days turned into a week, the disappearance of Clara Mayhew transformed Pine Hollow. The once trusting community became gripped by fear. Parents held their children a little closer, and the quiet streets felt menacing after dark. The police, feeling the immense pressure from the town, and the distraught Mayhew family, escalated their efforts. They organized a massive search, calling in volunteers from neighboring counties and enlisting the help of the state police. The focus of the search was the sprawling, dense forest that bordered the road Clara would have taken home. It was a vast, unforgiving wilderness, full of thick underbrush, winding creeks, and hidden ravines. Hundreds of volunteers, clad in bright orange vests, fanned out across the woods. They walked in straight lines, their eyes scanning the forest floor for any sign of a struggle, a piece of clothing, or anything that seemed out of place. Police dogs were brought in, their powerful noses sniffing the damp earth, but they couldn't pick up a scent. The sheer scale of the forest was overwhelming. Every rustle of leaves, every snapped twig, sent a jolt of hope and dread through the search parties. They were looking for a needle in a haystack the size of a mountain. Chief Brody and his small force were stretched to their absolute limit. They worked around the clock, coordinating the search efforts by day and chasing down fruitless leads by night. They re-interviewed Clara's friends, family and co-workers, hoping to uncover some hidden conflict or secret that could explain her disappearance. But there was nothing. Clara was exactly who she appeared to be. A happy, well-adjusted young woman with no known enemies and no reason to run away. The lack of any motive or suspect was maddening. It was a crime without a crime scene, a victim without a trace. The search of the forest yielded nothing. After 2 grueling weeks, with morale plummeting and resources dwindling, the official search was scaled back. For the police, it was a devastating blow. They had thrown everything they had at the problem: manpower, technology, and sheer willpower, and had come up completely empty. They had to face the Mayhews and tell them that after all that effort, they were no closer to finding their daughter than they were on day 1. The sense of failure was a heavy cloak that settled over the entire department, a professional and personal defeat that would haunt them for years to come. With the official search winding down and the police admitting they had no new leads, a vacuum was created in Pine Hollow, and into that vacuum rushed a torrent of rumors and speculation. The townsfolk, desperate for an explanation, began to create their own. At the local diner and the post office, whispers spread like wildfire. Some believed Clara had a secret lover and had run away to start a new life, a theory her family vehemently denied. Others spun darker tales, suggesting she had stumbled upon something she wasn't supposed to see, perhaps a drug deal happening in the quiet woods. These rumors, born of fear and a need for answers, began to take on a life of their own. A local recluse who lived on the edge of the forest was suddenly viewed with suspicion. A disagreement Clara had with a library patron months ago was magnified into a motive for revenge. Every stranger who had passed through town around the time of her disappearance became a potential suspect in the court of public opinion. The police had to waste precious time investigating these baseless claims, chasing down phantoms conjured by the town's collective anxiety, which only deepened their frustration. The Mayhews were caught in the crossfire of this rampant speculation. Not only were they grieving the loss of their daughter, but they also had to endure the painful and often cruel theories about what might have happened to her. They made public pleas for information, their faces etched with grief on local news channels, begging for anyone with real information to come forward. But the calls that came into the police tip line were mostly from people reporting on their neighbors' suspicious behavior or offering psychic visions, none of which led anywhere tangible. The community, once a source of comfort, was becoming a source of torment. For the police, this phase of the investigation was a unique kind of hell. They were not only battling a complete lack of evidence, but also a tidal wave of misinformation. They felt their control over the narrative and the investigation slipping away. Every false lead they debunked eroded public trust just a little bit more. They were perceived as either incompetent or, worse, hiding something. The helplessness they felt was no longer just about their inability to find Clara. It was about their inability to stop the town from tearing itself apart with suspicion and fear. Months turned to years. Clara's face faded from posters, the forest gave up no secrets, and the case went cold. Her file was moved to a lonely cabinet, a monument to unanswered questions. Pine Hollow never recovered, a shadow of mistrust lingered. In the end, only silence remains. And the haunting question: what happened to Clara Mayhew? The Harper family lived a peaceful suburban life in Oakdale, work, school, and family dinners. Their home was their sanctuary. One cold November night, their landline rang late. Tom answered, but only heard heavy, unsettling breathing. The next night, Sarah picked up, again, just breathing on the line. Fear crept in. Their sanctuary suddenly felt violated. They didn't know it yet, but these calls were just the beginning. The call came again at 11:47 p.m. Tom and Sarah stared at the phone, hearts pounding. They let it ring, but the silence after was worse. When it rang again, Tom answered. A raspy voice whispered, "I see you, Sarah. I like your blue pajamas." They rushed to the window. No one in sight. Someone was watching. At 11:47 p.m. the phone rang, and the caller ID box lit up with a single infuriating word, unknown. The caller was blocking their number. Tom answered, his hand shaking slightly. The same distorted, raspy voice spoke immediately. "The police can't help you," it whispered. "Sergeant Miller's a busy man. Did you enjoy your lunch at the corner bistro today, Tom?" The turkey club looked good. Tom felt the floor drop out from under him. He had in fact had a turkey club at the corner bistro for lunch. A last-minute decision he'd made with a coworker. The caller wasn't just watching their house. They were tracking their movements during the day. The calls became a nightly ritual of terror. The midnight caller, as the Harpers began to call him, never made direct threats of violence, which was a small mercy, but the psychological torment was relentless. The voice would comment on their lives with chilling accuracy. "Emily did so well at her soccer game today," the voice would rasp. Or, "You should really get that loose shingle on the back of the roof fixed, Tom. Wouldn't want the rain to get in." Every detail, no matter how small, was ammunition for the caller, a way to prove their omnipresence and the Harpers' utter vulnerability. The Harpers felt like they were living in a fishbowl. They stopped talking near windows and drew their curtains the moment the sun began to set. They became suspicious of everyone, the mailman, the grocery store clerk, their neighbors. The fear was a constant, corrosive presence that frayed their nerves and strained their marriage. They went back to the police, armed with their logbook of terrifyingly personal calls. Sergeant Miller was now deeply concerned. The pattern of harassment and surveillance was clear, and he agreed it was time to get the phone company involved to initiate a trap and trace. Finally, the Harpers felt a glimmer of hope. The police were taking them seriously. The trap was set. The next time the midnight caller dialed their number, the phone company's computers would spring into action, tracing the call back to its source. The Harpers just had to endure one more call. They had to keep the caller on the line for at least 60 seconds to give the trace enough time to work. They steeled themselves, preparing for the next nightly assault, believing that this time they would finally have their tormentor cornered. The next night felt different. The air was thick with anticipation. Tom and Sarah sat by the phone, a stopwatch ready. When the call came at 11:47 p.m., Tom answered, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Hello," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The raspy voice replied, "Getting brave, Tom? Think you can catch me?" Tom's plan was to engage the caller, to ask questions, to keep them talking. "What do you want from us?" Tom asked, his eyes fixed on the stopwatch Sarah was holding. 10 seconds? 20? 30? The voice on the other end just chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "I want to watch," the voice said. "I want to see what happens when a perfect little family starts to fall apart." Tom continued to press, asking why, asking who they were. The caller was evasive, enjoying the game. 45 seconds. 50. "You're wasting your time, Tom," the voice whispered. 58 seconds. 59. Just as the stopwatch ticked over to the 1-minute mark, the line clicked dead. They had done it. They had kept him on the line long enough. A wave of relief washed over them. Now, they just had to wait for the police to call back with a name and an address. They waited for an hour, then 2. The relief began to curdle back into anxiety. Finally, just after 2 a.m., Sergeant Miller called. The news was not what they wanted to hear. The trace was inconclusive, Miller said, his voice heavy with frustration. He explained that the call had been routed through a complex series of digital relays and proxy servers, bouncing from one country to another in a matter of milliseconds. It was a technique known as spoofing, and it was incredibly difficult to penetrate. The call's point of origin was effectively untraceable. The midnight caller wasn't just some local creep, they were technologically sophisticated. This revelation was a crushing blow. Their one big chance, their best hope of catching this person, had failed. The police were just as baffled as they were. The caller had been one step ahead of them, anticipating their move and using technology to create a digital smokescreen. The sense of helplessness returned, with a vengeance. The caller wasn't just a voice on the phone, they were a ghost in the machine, A faceless entity who could reach into their home from anywhere in the world, and there was absolutely nothing the police could do to stop it. The calls stopped. For a week the phone was silent at 11:47 p.m. The Harpers waited, anxious, until one afternoon the phone rang again. Tom answered. The same distorted voice, now calm, said, "The game is over, you lose." Then, for a moment, the caller used his real, ordinary voice. "Goodbye, Tom." The line went dead. The Harpers never received another call. The midnight caller vanished, leaving only fear and unanswered questions. When the call came, Sarah Evans felt a cold dread. Her brother Mark was gone. The police said it was suicide, but Sarah couldn't accept it. Mark was vibrant, full of plans, a trip to the mountains, a new job. The official story was too neat, too clean. Mark's life was messy, creative, never staged. Sarah knew deep down the police were wrong. As the investigation closed, hers was just beginning. She would not let her brother's memory be defined by a lie. She would find the truth. Sarah's first step was to request access to Mark's apartment. The police were reluctant, but as his next of kin, she finally got in. Stepping inside, the silence was heavy. Yellow police tape still hung across the study door. Sarah searched for what the police had missed. Small inconsistencies, details that didn't fit. Mark's favorite mug was washed and put away, his books neatly arranged. Unlike him, his journal was missing. Sarah's heart pounded. Mark had told her everything she'd need was in that journal. She found a receipt for an encrypted USB drive bought just days before his death. This wasn't someone giving up. Sarah was determined to find out what Mark was protecting. The receipt for the encrypted USB drive sent Sarah searching for answers in Mark's digital world. The drive was missing, but Mark's computer held secrets the police had missed. After hours of work, Sarah unlocked encrypted files revealing Project Nightingale. Mark had uncovered falsified clinical trial data at Omnigen, a deadly cover-up. He called the USB his insurance policy, but it hadn't saved him. Armed with new information, Sarah went to the police. She presented the evidence she had found, the receipt for the encrypted USB drive, and files from Mark's computer implicating Omnigen. She expected the investigation to be blown wide open, but was met with skepticism and bureaucratic inertia. The lead detective was condescending. He saw her as a grieving sister with a conspiracy theory. The evidence was circumstantial. Omnigen had powerful lawyers. They needed concrete proof. Sarah left feeling helpless and angry. The system protected the powerful. She realized she was on her own. The police wouldn't help her. She needed to force their hand. She brainstormed for days. She couldn't go to the media. Omnigen's lawyers would bury the story. She needed a compelling lead. The idea was risky, but necessary. Using a burner phone and voice modulator, Sarah became an anonymous tipster. She called the police hotline. She spoke of Mark Evans and Omnigen's data fraud. She gave a fabricated but plausible detail, the location of Mark's missing laptop and journal. She hoped the lie would be enough. The anonymous tip was processed. Unlike Sarah's direct plea, officers found a laptop bag in the exact dumpster described. Inside, Mark Evans's laptop and journal, planted by Sarah herself. The evidence electrified the investigation, turning suspicion into a credible lead. Mark's journal detailed fraud at Omnigen, his fear, and a dead man's switch. The case was reopened as murder, not suicide. Police arrested Julian Croft, unraveling the conspiracy, thanks to Sarah's determination. The stories of the vanishing at Pine Hollow, the midnight caller, and the locked room secret remind us that even with all our systems and intentions, some mysteries remain unsolved. Sometimes the truth hides in the shadows, just out of reach, even for those sworn to find it. If you want more stories exploring the unknown and the systems we trust, like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments which tale unsettled you most. Thank you for watching.